Jutah. Jutah, come in.
This is Jutah. I'm ready for my instructions.
Very well. This will be your first taste of real battle.
Is this all you've got, little man?
Diving into the pit of forgotten PlayStation 1 games, we find Silent Bomber, an extremely short but intense arcade-style top-down third-person action game from Bandai. You are Jutah, a genetically engineered super soldier filled with regret for past sins. Armed with your arm-mounted dual bomb cannons and 3 special types of area effect bomb, you fight through the interior of the mega spaceship the Dante to save the planet of Hornet from the Dante's laser cannons. Silent Bomber was a playable game on the official PlayStation Demo Disc 30 released in March of 2000, unfortunately sandwiched between the eagerly awaited demo for Siphon Filter 2 and Spyro the Dragon 2, so despite being fun, because it was a new, unknown franchise, Silent Bomber fell into almost immediate obscurity. But if you've never played this game, have you missed out on a hidden gem? And if you did play this game, you probably did what I did as a kid, which was reach the final chessboard boss battle and then give up after hours and hours of trying. So let's replay the whole thing, analyse what few mechanics it does have, critique the story, and then finally avenge 9-year-old me by doing what I could never do and actually kill the stupidly hard final boss. And then when the dust settles, we can ask the simple question: Silent Bomber, was it any good? As usual, a massive thank you to all the supporters on Patreon, Twitch and YouTube who keep the channel going. More information on how you can support at the end. For now, let's begin. Flashing light warning, the final level of this game is just an absolute mess of flashing lights and quickly switching visuals. Silent Bomber is an arcade-style action game developed by CyberConnect and published by Bandai. Now, CyberConnect were a relatively small game developer at the time, only known for their one previous game, Tail Concerto. They would go on to develop almost all of the Dot Hack and Naruto video games. And Bandai were at the time a growing force in the video game market, but they had not yet merged with Namco to become the powerhouse they are today. Both the designer and director of Silent Bomber were relatively new in the gaming scene, and both would go on to see minor success with the Dot Hack game series. Unfortunately, Silent Bomber itself didn't sell well enough to get a sequel or get good enough reviews to launch anyone's careers. First off, the game is extremely short. You can finish the entire main campaign in about 2 hours, and that's including watching all the cutscenes. And because levels give bonuses based on speed of completion, there's probably about 1 hour of solid gameplay here, but thankfully there is a decent versus mode we'll look at too. So let's get playing. We start with a sci-fi intro movie which explains very little about the world, the characters, their motivations, or the situation they're in. The game fully expects you to have read the physical manual. But even if you do, the world building and characterization is extremely weak and flimsy. So let's jump into the tutorial which sets the scene several years before the events of the Dante. We meet Jutah, genetically engineered super soldier, and get shown how to move and blow things up.
First, remove any obstacles that stand in the way of the squads coming up behind you. Then, plant a bomb on the marked area. Alright, now stay clear of the blast radius. Good work.
So Silent Bomber is a locked camera arcade-style game with almost puzzle-like combat. It's an interesting mix between Bomberman and bullet hell shoot-em-ups. You plant bombs by pressing square and blow them up with triangle. To start with, you can only place 2 at a time, shown by this gauge here, and as you advance, the amount of total bombs you can place increases. But planting just 1 bomb is weak, so you want to stack them up.
Stack?
A technique employing multiple explosives to increase the blast. When you set it, hit the button twice. Then put some distance between you and the bombs. There. That'll do it.
Stacking bombs causes the power and blast radius to increase exponentially, meaning a stack of 4 bombs is far more powerful than 4 single bombs placed close together. But what if the enemy isn't on the floor? What if they're far away or flying?
Enemy at close range!
Okay, listen. I'll explain how to use the lock-on unit. First, hold down the set button and call up your sight. Fix the enemy on your sight and lock on. Now let up on the button. You've just planted a bomb on the enemy. Hit the detonator button. Well done. Pick up the material dropped by the enemy. What you have there is a highly volatile liquid. Using this in conjunction with your bombs will result in more powerful and deadly explosions. Look at the window located to the side of your life gauge. Note that napalm is currently selected. Push the button and try using it. That's enough. When you've obtained various types of liquid, you can switch among them with the Item Select button. Eliminate this final obstacle on your own.
Holding square brings up the aiming cone, which is always facing the same direction as the player. When you lock onto an enemy, repeatedly press square to plant bombs directly onto the enemy, blowing them up as usual with the triangle button. Your basic bombs never run out, but you've also got 3 special power-ups, and you can hold 20 of each type, and you cycle through your selected power-up with the L1 and R1 buttons. You plant a special power-up bomb with circle. They do count toward your current plantable limit, and they're detonated with triangle just the same. You've got napalm, which burns an area on the floor but doesn't affect flying enemies, paralysis, which short-circuits all electrical enemies nearby but doesn't affect biological stuff, and gravity, which pulls enemies into a spinning vortex for a short time but doesn't work on bosses. Special bombs are only ever planted on the floor and cannot be locked onto an enemy or shot from a distance. The tutorial is actually exceptionally well paced to introduce you to all the mechanics and then pitch you against a small group of flying enemies, and the final move you teach is the burst dash. Jump with X, but double tap to dash forward. Dashing also disengages you from any enemy missile locks. And now go and blow stuff up. Simple yet incredibly effective. The opening group fight against 4 copters is all about evading missiles while planting and detonating quickly. And then when they're all taken down, a mini-boss, the hover tank, turns up, and this is a small taste of what the game does well. You can lock onto the tank body or the tank turret, and blowing one of them up is enough. Or you can just plant bombs down on the floor, wait for the hover tank to drive over them, and then blow them up. Or use napalm, or burst dodge away from the main cannon. You've got a big area to move around in, and the enemy puts up a decent defense, making this an actual engaging fight. And when the tank is destroyed, Jutah gets the command to destroy the entire place because it's an enemy camp. However, all is not as it seems.
What's this place?
It's an enemy stronghold. Burn down the entire installation.
Roger. Those are... But I thought there were soldiers in here. These people are civilians!
Calm down, Jutah. Burn everything to the ground.
But...
That's an order.
Understood, sir.
Jump forward 7 years to where we are now. Jutah suffers nightmares about the time he was instructed by his horrific commander to destroy a civilian compound. Now, the only way to know the full story is to read the very hard-to-find manual, so here's the cliff notes. It seems that when the military government collapsed 7 years ago, Jutah was arrested as a war criminal and sentenced to 30 decades in prison. So he breaks out and joins the ragtag team of rebels who are trying to take down the super spaceship the Dante before the Dante can use its mega cannon to destroy the planet of Hornet. But again, none of this is explained in-game. The cutscenes, however, are voiced, and the quality ranges from dire to absurdly over the top. Let's just have a listen.
Are you there? You did set the autopilot, right?
Yeah.
Then get down here to the lander. Friend or foe is FOF. Our ship will transmit this code to get past their sensors, then 6 assault teams will infiltrate.
Providing we can get that close, of course.
Our codes are flawless.
If we can really trust these codes, shouldn't they have sent in a crack military unit or something? Don't you think, Jutah?
My only duty is to destroy my designated target. I'm concerned with nothing else.
Boy, you just can't wait to start blowing things up, huh? Get this straight. We're here to save Hornet. Safeguarding our planet is the objective.
Excuse me. So we're merely pawns in some elaborate game that will determine the fate of the world, is that it? Then which player is going to be fortunate enough to checkmate fate, I wonder?
Strangely, the best voice acting isn't even done by the main cast. It's given by a random side character who becomes the unintentional emotional linchpin of your entire journey. So let's just take a quick look at the voice talent, at least for the English dub. The main character of Jutah was voiced by Skip Stelrecht, the voice of Ryu from the Street Fighter TV show. He's seen a decent career working on various Naruto games. But interestingly, in the original Japanese version of Silent Bomber, Jutah's voice actor is also Dante in the Devil May Cry animated show and Sephiroth in almost every voiced Sephiroth role, including the Advent Children film. Henri, the team's commander, was voiced by Deborah Rogers, an actress whose last credit was in 2006 as the operator from the Ghost in the Shell Solid State Society movie. Benoit, the suave but obviously evil Frenchman who had that cryptic line about checkmating fate while also holding a chess piece, is Richard Cancino. And this guy you might know because he also voiced Duragon C. Mikado in The Bouncer, a game we've covered on this channel before. And that's not the only Bouncer connection. Michino, the selfish member of the team, is voiced by Bridget Hoffman, who did Dominique in The Bouncer. So you've got passable voice talent, but again, like many games from the time, because it's translated from Japanese to English and the translated script clearly didn't include the context that many of these lines were being said in, the delivery is awful because the actors have nothing to work with. So Mission 1, assault the Dante. The anti-air cannons are taking out our assault craft, so we're sent in to blow them up on the ship's surface, and the first thing we're told to do is to destroy this box to get an E-chip.
There's an E-chip, an E-unit power-up, hidden in that box located in front of you. Destroy the box and get the E-chip.
E-chips are how you upgrade your three main stats: the number of plantable bombs you have, the range of your lock-on, and how much damage you'll ignore because of your shields. Unfortunately, accessing the upgrade screen is a somewhat clunky feature, and while there isn't much to Silent Bomber, it's small issues like this which make it feel incomplete. Pressing start pauses the game, but then you need to press select while the game is paused to actually activate the menu, and then you select your E-unit config through the menu. And this is your upgrade screen. Similar to the Bouncer in its utilitarian approach, it's an extremely basic layout. The more you upgrade the bomb capacity, range of lock-on, or shield, the more E-chips it costs for the next upgrade in that specific path. You can see the cost of the next upgrade listed vertically. And thankfully, you can rearrange the E-chip placement for free at any time, so this isn't a commitment. So we run around, collect E-chips to get stronger, find some napalm paralysis and gravity liquid, lock on, and then blow stuff up. Now, each mission is remarkably short and normally features a single, simple objective. In this case, blow up the anti-air cannons. Now, there's no map because no level is big enough to need one, and when you get close to an objective, they're marked with a big red target icon. And when you've blown up all the targets or completed whatever objective you have, the end door is always marked with a floating arrow. And now, two things the tutorial did not cover, starting with the enemies. They're not just present in the level from the start, they are spawned in through construction points or at doorways. Now, you'll deal with the spawners in the same way that you deal with everything else, just stack some bombs and blow them up. But then there's also a movement technique that's never mentioned. You can wall jump. While burst dashing needs a quick double tap, wall jumps are best at the apex of a jump and always push you higher and away from the wall. And there is exactly one moment in the game that the wall jump technique is actually needed, and it's to find a secret, so you can finish Silent Bomber without ever wall jumping. So the plot is paper thin and almost entirely missed within the game itself, and the voice acting is questionable at best. The upgrade system is hidden 2 menus deep and is pretty basic, and not all of the controls were explained to you in the tutorial. But how does it actually play? Well, this is where Silent Bomber shines, because it plays incredibly well. The first level actually starts with you getting an E-chip from a box, so the player now knows blow up boxes. And then you have an enemy spawner, so you blow them up, and now you're blocked by a laser gate, but you can blow up the gate post to advance. So in the first level, you've presented destructible scenery, enemy spawners and hazards, and all of them are solved with bombs. The core gameplay loop is just plant bomb, blow bomb up, and it quite simply does not get boring because it's not a long enough game to get boring. It's also just fun. The speed of the lock-on, the clean sound effects, the lovely explosion visuals, combined with tight controls, quick dodging, and the gorgeous colourful explosions of enemy projectiles or melee attacks make Silent Bomber a treat to play. Now, graphically, it's got similarities to the mechanized structure of Armored Core in both the background visuals and the enemies. The wall or floor textures of Metal Gear Solid with the top-down camera and action-heavy explosion landscape of Future Cop LAPD, and some boss designs remind me of the Ghost in the Shell game. And with most of the levels having grated floors with visible lower flooring and stunning particle effects from enemy energy weapons, Silent Bomber looks good and plays ahead of its time. But most levels are just filling time until the end because the game really shines at its end level bosses. So after taking out the AA guns, we meet our first boss, the Walking Tank. And there's always a small cinematic that introduces you to every boss. Now this thing is also a walking AA gun, which means it's narratively tied to your objective, but it's the variety in this boss's moveset which makes it satisfying to take down. Most boss rooms are just open areas. The focus is never on platforming but on pattern recognition from boss attacks, and this can be a shame because Silent Bomber does have the control scheme to allow for a more demanding and complex platform-focused encounter, but they never really explore that. The first boss has targeting lasers, homing missiles, and it can surround itself with a shield and then slide toward you. And this shield prevents any locked-on bombs being placed and nullifies all damage from floor-planted bombs while active, so this is a time to dive, not attack. And it's here you'll also discover the main limitation of the lock-on system. The targeting cone only ever faces the direction you are moving, meaning to aim at an enemy you have to be actively moving toward them. And as the enemy is big and the lock-on target can sometimes be the enemy's body, you can sometimes run into the enemy's legs or extremities and take damage before you get the lock-on. Now Silent Bomber does support the analog sticks and you can use the left stick to move, so they really missed a trick by not having the right analog stick be the targeting aimer and the R2 button as, say, plant bomb. Would have been cool to run around the side of an enemy and throw bombs sideways before blowing them up. So we take the boss down and then we're given a level score, a letter rank from A to E based on points earned, and this is a combination of enemies killed, damage avoided, and how long you took to complete the level. Now, it seems that the most important factor here by far is the time you take to complete the level. If you speed run a level, even if you only kill essential targets and take quite a lot of damage, you will still score higher than if you killed everything but took too long. Before the next level, you can see a map of the Dante showing our progress through it, which is a nice visualization of the journey from the original crash landing to the ultimate ship's core. Unfortunately, this is a preset linear path. You cannot make a choice to go one way or another. Mission 2 starts with waves of smaller enemies, wasting no time in getting to the action, and then our first new elite enemy type, Laser Samurai, or as the game calls them, hard shells. This is the moment the difficulty takes a bit of a bump. You'll want to stay away from the sword dudes but close in on the shoulder-mounted laser cannon dude. You'll also notice he's a different colour. This matters. And the graphics for this fight continue to be lovely, although you may get a bit of stutter with multiple explosions overlapping the laser cannon shots, and when you do take down this dude, you don't kill him, you just break his weapon and blow his arm off, which gives you this.
You just signed your death warrant! You're dead! Count on it!
I love this entire interaction. No names, no personal history, no reason, just a brand new nemesis instantly formed because you hate him and he hates you and you beat him in a fight. He's also the only hard shell in a yellow suit, so now you have a visually recognizable, reoccurring nemesis. And his voice acting is also better than everyone's except maybe Benoit. This leads to the next boss, a massive ship-mounted railgun, and this boss actually spawns more enemies, so you've got spawn points around the side and 2 static cannons which revive over time. And in a lovely touch, the main damage beam from the cannon also destroys the enemies if they get caught in it. Now, an interesting mechanic here. The gun is shielded against your lock-on, but the shield drops only when it's charging to fire, so you've got a small window to plant some bombs and detonate them and then dodge out the way, but doing this also means standing in the firing line. And it will remain difficult up until you discover the immense power of the paralysis mine. The blue electroshock special bomb disables all robotics for a short time, including shields and charging up guns, which lets you bomb just anything to death in relative peace. Now, napalm hurts you as well, and gravity bombs can pull enemies toward you and do melee damage if they hit you, but the paralysis bomb is 100% overpowered, totally safe, and is the best power-up. So we destroy the gun, head inside the Dante, and get a radio call from our team member Benoit. Remember, he's the guy with the weird chess obsession.
That's my Jutah.
Benoit?
I was watching you fight, observing the man in action. You truly do belong on a battlefield.
What is that supposed to mean?
You'll find out eventually. We'll meet again.
Mission 3 starts with a cutscene of a bulbous character that you'll never meet and doesn't really matter. So we need to create a diversion so the remaining landing parties can safely board the Dante. This is something we can do, and the level design here is lovely. The tight corridors actually work against you because you can be hurt by your own bombs. So you can't just plant wildly and blow everything up because you'll hurt yourself, and this means you're now forced to be much more methodical. We've also switched to a diagonal camera angle which works quite well here, letting you see the enemies arrive in the background and keep the explosions in the foreground, while appreciating the scale of the ship, especially as the scenery now explodes, so don't be standing on these light up walkway sections or you'll take damage. Regular enemies now also have lock-on lasers, shields, and slide moves, previous boss moves, which show mechanical progression. Silent Bomber doesn't just get harder by increasing the health of enemies, it gets harder by giving the enemies a more varied offensive toolkit based on the mechanics you've already seen, which is a lovely way to do it. Push through this blockaded corridor and then use the rubble of the interior to climb up, meaning we've now got vertical level design too. Then we take out this new design of tank while blowing up some more generators, and I do appreciate the depth implied by having the distance fade into darkness. With just a few select structural pillars rising into the ceiling, this is a great example, using the limits of the PlayStation 1 render distance to imply more depth than you could ever actually show. Now, while your own bombs may hurt you, if you jump just before detonation, you'll be safe, because the AoE only seems to spread out along the floor, not up into the air, which is why I've discovered the tactic of plant a stack of bombs, jump, detonate, lather, rinse, repeat. Distraction caused, onto mission 4, destroy the remaining hard shells before they become active. This just means blowing up the ones in the hangar, but bad news, most of them are already active. And hey, it's our old yellow-suited nemesis. Now these enemies actually have physical shields, which counters your lock-on targeting, so you need to plant stacks and lure them over, or just use the good old reliable electro stun bomb. And when you do meet your nemesis again, he is not messing around, and this is where the game kind of assumes that you know the controls, so the difficulty starts to climb. It remains well paced, right up until the last level. Your nemesis is heavily guarded, and his mounted cannon is brutal, especially being hit by it stuns you, and while stunned, you can't lock on, detonate, or burst dodge. I do love, however, that when you defeat him for a second time, you still don't kill him, you just destroy his arm again.
Damn it! That hurts! I won't forget this!
Mission 5 has our original crew pinned down on the Dante's exterior, so we need to go and rescue them. This means fighting through the launch bay, and I love how you have vertical levels and you can see the Dante launching fighters as they whiz past you on the levels below. Also, if you get hit by these fighters, they do a small amount of damage to you. This level is one of the larger open spaces, and despite the vertical visuals, actually moving from floor to floor needs you to take a lift down. You can't just jump. This is likely a limitation of how much level they can actually have loaded at once and how tall the playable area actually is. We now have some elite flying enemies who will lock onto you and launch missiles back. Just burst dash to clear the lock-on, and when you do reach the crashed lander ship, important note, you can hurt your own ship with your own bombs, so don't. This includes splash damage for larger stacks or constant napalm damage, so be extra careful fighting around your own team. This means that protecting the lander is hard, not because the enemies are tough, but because it's just super easy to blow your own ship up. With the lander protected, we head on to mission 6, moving inside the Dante, and between each mission, you'll get some cutscenes where the characters talk to each other, and they're almost all awful.
We barely made it through that with our necks intact, huh, John? Trading shots with hard shells without wearing any armor. You're one crazy geezer.
Not as crazy as a man who charges headfirst into battle to save his crewmates. I was only following orders. That doesn't change the fact that you risked your own life in order to rescue us. Thanks.
Jutah, see that bulkhead right over there? I want you to go back inside the ship.
Previously on this channel, I've covered Future Cop LAPD, and that game has almost no plot, but it didn't need it because you go from self-contained mission to self-contained mission. The one consistence is your narrator telling you to go and be a futuristic cop. I feel Silent Bomber would have benefited from cutting a lot of the emotional narrative that it tries to rely on and focusing on the gameplay itself and the natural nemesis fights which have emerged as a result of the gameplay. I don't care about Utah's 7-year nightmare or the personal motivations motivations of the crew, because they're never explored enough to be relevant, and because you don't make any choices about which level you go to, you can't put any one of the crew in specific jeopardy and force the player to make a choice, save A or save B. Take the difficult route to improve the crew's morale, or take the easy route to be solo. There is very little RPG here. It is all arcade action, so focus on that. Now that's not to say I don't care about any NPCs in this game. I care very much about our nemesis, the yellow hardsuit, and I care about him because we have created him through gameplay. Silent Bomber is a stunningly good gameplay loop, actually harmed by trying to weave an unengaging emotional subplot through itself. We move further into the Dante, more corridors filled with traps this time. This means either blow up the traps or find these small spinning red buttons, plant a bomb on them, and then detonate it when you're ready to dash through. Because each button press only deactivates the laser for a few seconds, and I like this. It's using the delayed detonation choice as a game mechanic, and to my delight they do explore this in combat later. The next section switches to a side-scrolling viewpoint and is definitely the most platforming style level, really exploring the jump mechanic. The only enemies are static gun turrets, and you have to move from side to side, climbing up the interior. This is also the only point where a wall jump will reach a hidden E-chip. The boss of this level is another walking tank, but now the laser cannon is vastly upgraded. It spins around and it uses the shield far more frequently. You've also got two connected orbs which spray out a flurry of weaker but disruptive photon shots, and then a quad laser blast to be avoided. And like most of the bosses, it's short but intense. Silent Bomber never overstays its welcome, but you can feel a bit shortchanged if you paid full price for this game. It's incredibly good, but over disappointingly quickly, which I think is my current rating on TripAdvisor. Mission 7 starts with us meeting Machino, a member of our own team, and then having this little back and forth.
My, how disturbing. Planning to burn your friends, too?
Machino, aren't you supposed to be backing up the lieutenant?
Yeah, but she's been captured. Don't make those scary faces at me. There's nothing I could do.
Where did they take her?
Don't tell me you're planning on rescuing her. Hey, you're not worried about that uptight chick, are you?
A commander is necessary to continue this operation.
You'll recognize the voice actor as Dominique from The Bouncer, but more importantly, we're on the same team. We're meant to be this crack team of covert specialists. Why are you acting like a petulant teenager? This is why I say remove the drama subplot. It actively makes the game worse. One of my favorite sci-fi TV shows was Star Trek: The Next Generation, and the reason for this is that all the characters in it talk to each other like actual adults, and you feel the weight of those decisions that they make. If you've seen The Next Generation, you'll recognize the frame on screen where Data explains to Worf why he needs to respect him more when he's acting captain. The scene is two men talking as responsible Starship officers to reach a mutually acceptable conclusion, and it's one of the best scenes in TV because both of them are acting rationally. You also feel in more danger because when plans that they've made go wrong, you know they were plans made by actual smart people. When you see things like this in a game, people trying to be selfish, you aren't invested in the plans because you know they're going to go wrong because they're being made by idiots. The lieutenant has also been captured and we need her back, but Machino says that only she knows where she is and she'll tell us if we destroy the air filters in the Dante's residential district. She assures us that no one will actually die if we do this because the backup air filters will kick in, but the confusion will let her escape and she is very selfish. I don't quite understand her plan, but I don't need justification to go and blow up a ton of scenery because the gameplay is fun. This level is basically what Silent Bomber was built for. Enemy spawns, destructible scenery, enough space to move and dash, things to jump on, power-ups hidden inside things, and a great big space. And it all leads to one of the absolute best boss battles. Our nemesis is back, but they have decided to go big or go home. This is the moment I thought, yes, they're taking risks on this level. And it's working. You've leveled the residential district and now you are chased by an absolutely massive tank, so big it's crushing all the buildings by itself. So big you can't even hurt it. You need to dash around the back and plant bombs on its back. This is also the only part of the game that you need to actively jump onto a moving platform. But make sure you don't stand there too long because it will spin its upper body around and slice at you with its laser sword arms. Now this is a beautiful 3-stage boss fight because once you've destroyed the flatbed, you then need to lock onto the neck and finally bomb the head. And more attacks get unlocked as you do more damage to it. Lasers, missiles, slashing arms. Brilliant fight. Uses combat and platforming and scenery and has progressive difficulty. 10 out of 10, no notes.
But how?
Where's the lieutenant?
Ah, don't be in such a big hurry. Exit that area first.
With that, onto Mission 8, where Bulbous Boy is back and sending the elites after us.
Since you haven't eliminated these intruders yet, I have no choice. I can't believe it's gotten to this. I'll have to send out our strongest unit, dispatch scrambled orders to Blue Mist.
The Blue Mist level is simple but great. It takes place almost entirely on a speeding square platform racing through the ship's interior sewer system. The opening section starts with some smaller, weaker enemies strafing over the platform and then a small attack boat appearing, but you can't lock onto the boat. So the only way to damage it is to hold lock on, and then if you try to plant a bomb when you've got the aiming cone out but with nothing locked onto, you'll just shoot the bomb out as far as you can. So you're essentially throwing mines out to try and stop the boat, and this is the first time you've absolutely had to use this mechanic to take an enemy out. And this is a lovely use of turning the limitation of the lock-on mechanic into an actual gameplay bit. After the boat, the blue mist enemies themselves dramatically appear by blowing a hole in the tunnel roof and slowly descending in. These are powered up hard shells with shoulder-mounted laser cannons, and I love the blue and green color contrast. Although to me, the green power rods always reminded me of the old Warhammer Necron models with the green glowing sticks. The blue mist enemies fly under and over the platform, and you can only lock onto them when they come in for an attack, so there's this lovely element of trying to out-time them. And they have a variety of attacks: direct lasers, indirect missiles, and then a powered up bouncy energy ball which they launch, and then that follows you around until you blow it up. And finally, they have a shielded dash attack which crosses the platform and really uses the limited space of the level exceptionally well, because the camera spins to follow them, which makes the whole thing feel like an action film. Now, 3 blue mists at the same time is a challenge, but eventually you'll blow them up, but that's not the last of them.
Why? Why can't we kill one soldier who's on foot?
Colonel, the advanced unit's been wiped out. How could Blue Mist Best be taken out so quickly?
Calm down. Next time, we'll finish it.
Note how in that cinematic there are 9 blue mist hard shells and the commander. This is actually respected later. Mission 9, we break into the prisoner holding facility to rescue Henri, the mission commander, and I discovered that you can stack up bombs and use the increased blast radius to hit switches for the gates through the laser of the gate itself, which I think is unintended, but if it was intended, it's never used again. Fight through some more small corridors, and then there is a god-awful interpersonal drama cutscene about battle and regret, and oh please God, just remove this. It's so bad. It paints the entire crew as undisciplined children, not the elite fighting force they're meant to be.
A commander, huh? What a joke. That's a title I don't deserve to wear. What kind of commander gets herself captured right off the bat? I'm no leader. I give up.
On to Mission 10. Turns out not everything on the Dante is mechanical. They've actually got a rather well-equipped biolab and have been creating some creatures not entirely unlike Tyranids. These creatures are really interesting mechanically on a combat level. They've got 2 close-range claws and an acid spit attack. Now, you can lock onto them, but you can only lock onto the claws. But when you detonate your bombs, the claws will blow up without killing the main body. And with no claw left, there is nothing to lock onto, so you now have to make sure you're planting stacks and luring the enemy over like the old times. Now, I tried to use the paralysis bomb, but in a lovely touch, the creatures are immune because the paralysis is an EMP and they are not machines. This means you're switching back to napalm. Now, the constant damage ticks of the napalm actually stun lock these creatures into the same position, letting you AoE stack next to them. And I love how this camera angle switches from a sideways battle to a front-on journey, very arcade-like. And I also like how you can see the creatures pacing back and forth on the upper levels behind the glass before they jump onto you. And then we reach the bio boss, and if you're not good with spiders, look away now. This boss is interesting, not because of the design, that's lovely, but because of how its design essentially demands you have to play. The spider boss is massive. It sends rings of damage out across the floor, so you have to jump over them, which is nice, but the rings get bigger as they get further away, so you're encouraged to stay close to the spider. But then it spawns a ton of little spiderlings, which encourage you to run away, and these things are super fast and you have not got time to lock on. But the only way to lock onto the actual spider's body itself is to be directly underneath it, which means you'll get hit by the legs. However, if you try and play this defensively, mechanically, the way the game wants you to, forward, backward, you actually die quite a lot. So I tried a new approach, just run directly under the spider, plant and detonate as fast as I can, essentially trying to out-damage the enemy. And that actually works remarkably well. It's almost a shame that this impressive-looking boss is best dealt with by staying directly under it where you don't see any of it and just spamming attack. This, of course, leads to more awful cutscenes.
I see you really have been cutting loose. How does it feel? Does it remind you of when you were at Tarakan? Is it reminiscent of those days of slaughter?
Who are you?
The party will soon begin, and then I have no doubt that you'll discover the other face that is hidden behind Dante.
Now, Mission 11 is interesting both from a combat mechanical point and from a massive in-game bug point which still exists to this day, because you can't patch PlayStation 1 games. The entire level is fighting waves of blue mist elite enemies as you ride an elevator from the bottom to the top floor so you can storm the bridge of the Dante. And just like the sewer level, the blue mists fly under and over the platform, but in a new twist, instead of all the blue mists attacking from one side together, which makes them easy to follow, they circle around the platform, attacking at the same time. And they only get close enough to lock onto when they are also about to fire, so there's lots of dodging involved. The blue mists attack in 3 groups of 3, which accurately respects the 9 shown in the cutscene earlier, and when you've dealt with all of them, the Colonel shows up in a mega suit, with more guns and more health, and this is a mini-boss. Now, the Colonel is immune to your bombs, both because he's armored and he's too far away to lock onto, but the Colonel does send out some laser cutting discs attached by red lasers to his suit, which dash around on the floor, and then they retract into the suit's shoulders. So you need to plant some bombs on the discs, wait for them to be retracted, and then detonate them just before the suit closes, because if the suit closes, your bombs will be deactivated. Now, this is a lovely use of delayed detonation as a combat mechanic, and as you hurt him more, he uses more attacks, scattering missiles from above, flying above or below you, and then shooting a laser array across toward you. Eventually, everything happens at the same time, and this is a brilliant fight, and when you win, he has a fantastic death line, no dramatic personal backstory, no attempt at salvation or being a greater good, he just yells,
A fitting end for one who lives on the field of battle. I regret nothing!
You're now on the top level. The bridge is just ahead.
Brilliant ending. So we reach the top, leave the level to go to the next, and the game crashes. Now, I thought maybe this is an emulation issue, so I googled it, and no. It turns out that some versions of Silent Bomber, most often the European PAL versions, will crash to black screen after Mission 11. It's random, but it seems incredibly likely, and there is a solution to preventing this crash. Skip the Mission 11 intro cinematic. If you do this, the game will not crash. I have no idea why. Mission 12 has us defending Henri while she tries to hack into the system and open the main control room doors. This is a wave defense mission, and this is the moment the game gets difficult. You'll be swarmed with biomutants, so you'll plant bombs on them, but your own bombs also damage the shield protecting Henri, so you'll need to plant a single bomb, distract the mutants, lure them away from the center, and then kill them. Your napalm also hurts the shield. This is more frustrating than challenging, but after surviving for 5 minutes of constant bio-enemy attacks, we're on to Mission 13. This opens with a CGI video of a fleet of attack ships from the planet Hornet trying to attack the Dante. Remember, we're trying to defend this planet. Unfortunately, the fleet is wiped out by a single blast from the Dante's main cannon, which shows us how powerful the cannon is. This also sets up the next mission: go and disable the 4 collider tubes powering the main cannon. And this level is different in 2 ways. First, it's the only timed level. You've got 15 minutes to destroy all 4 tubes. And second, it's the only level with backtracking. Each reactor tube is found in a room connected to this central circular column room. Thankfully, the floor is numbered so you can track which door you've been through. Now, this level is hard. Destroying all 4 tubes in 50 minutes is pretty tight, and the level itself has way more enemies firing way more small but stunning projectiles, lots of tight jumps, very few health refill power-ups, and switches which open laser fences, but in an interesting complex touch, the switches you need to activate are on moving walls, which scroll vertically. So you need to plant a bomb and wait for the wall to scroll down to be within range of the explosion before it will open the fence. It's kind of a shame they only use this mechanic once, attaching a bomb to a moving wall, when it's more frustrating than impressive. There are so many areas you could have used attaching a bomb to a moving piece of scenery to reach an enemy or a switch. In fact, just thinking about the amount of potential that Silent Bomber has makes me really sad we never got a sequel. But eventually you'll destroy all 4 collider tubes, disable the main cannon, and make it to the central room, the brain room as they call it, and this is mission 14. Now, it's taken me about an hour and a half to get to this point so far. It's not a long game, but this final mission will double or triple your playtime because this is insanely hard.
That's right. I ordered the Dante to annihilate Hornet. Brain is merely carrying out that command in the most rational and practical manner. There's only one way to stop it. Come, Jutah. Come to the Brain Room. Let's finish this, shall we?
So, to absolutely no one's shock, Benoit is evil and has taken command of the Dante. Now, with no more cannon, he's just going to crash the ship directly into the planet Hornet. Why? No idea. His motivations are never explained. The level starts on a super cool hive of red laser walkways which shower you with E-chips and special bombs, so you are fully stocked up for the final fight, and as you collect all of these, Benoit will interrupt you periodically to deliver an over-the-top monologue about the fate of the planet.
When that incandescent heat bearing the mass of a continent comes crashing down accompanied by countless fragments, what a beautiful sight it will be.
So we reach the brain room and begin the final boss, and this is the part that everyone remembers. Indeed, when I tweeted out that I was covering Silent Bomber, everyone who played it remembered this bit. In fact, if you Google Silent Bomber and read forums or Reddit posts, it's this chess game boss that people remember because it is unreasonably difficult. Benoit is obsessed with chess, so the brain room of the Dante is presented as a floating chessboard hologram in the void of space. Enemies in the shape of chess pieces move across the board to attack you. Pawns will simply shuffle forward one space at a time with basic attacks, and when you blow them up, they shatter into polygons and swirl around in the air before reforming into more pieces, which is visually gorgeous. But the pawns aren't the only problems, it's the fast-moving knights and then the speedy rooks with side lasers which really catch you off guard. And when the queen appears, flanked with bishops, good lord, it gets intense. The queen dashes around protected by a shield, and when the shield drops, she immediately fires a brutal 4-way spinning laser. Now, doing any damage to the queen stops the laser but restores the shield. And while this is happening, the bishops are bouncing around and then stopping to call in a devastating vertical orbital blast with a massive AoE around themselves. Now, this chess battle lasts about 10 full minutes and is difficult, but when you finally beat it, the actual battle begins. And you'll now be fighting both insanely hard mechanics and overwhelming, nauseating visuals. This is the fight against Benoit, and the first thing you'll notice is how the room looks. If you have issues with flashing lights, look away now. There are actually 3 background visuals happening at the same time. The first is the red grid and the black void of the hologram that you're trapped within. Then you have flashes of the actual physical room that you're in, the brain of the Dante itself, which looks like any other room on the ship. And then you've got this cinematic shot of the Dante crashing through the atmosphere towards Hornet, the planet. You can see the flames washing over the nose cone of the Dante. Now, each of these is a decent visual by itself. The problem is they are all played at the same time, and they all exist at different angles. So while this is going on, you've got the boss fight itself. Benoit has 3 main attacks. The first is becoming a giant hologram and grabbing you off the floor. While grabbed, you'll lose health constantly. Just plant some bombs and blow them up quickly to make him drop you. But doing this doesn't actually hurt him, it just frees you. The second is having himself and 2 clones teleport around you in a triangle and instantly drop full bomb stacks, because Benoit uses bombs just like you. If he does this, you have to burst dash out before they all blow up. And the final attack is, just like Jutah, he'll lock onto you and tag you with bombs before detonating them, but he tags and detonates far faster than you. So Benoit is unreasonably fast, far more powerful, and visually difficult to spot in this mess of a boss fight. Now, you can dodge the holograms if you're fast enough, and eventually I do discover the best tactic is to just run away until he follows you, spin round and plant one bomb on him before detonating it immediately, and then just keep running away. But make no mistake, this boss battle is a difficulty spike. The difficulty curve of Silent Bomber is gentle and smooth until this level where it's just an absolute vertical line. It took me over an hour to beat this level by itself. But the worst part is, if you die on this Benoit fight, and you will, you have to replay the entire 10-minute chess grid opening again. And you cannot skip Benoit's in-game cutscenes, effectively making this a 2-stage boss battle where each stage is brutal. No other fight in the game is this messy or this unforgiving, and I have no doubt that many playthroughs of the game were stopped here. I had this game as a kid and I could never kill Benoit, but I'm an adult now, with time to spare and an axe to grind. So this is for everyone who played this forgotten gem and died endlessly to this stupid chess match. Run, bomb, detonate, and eventually, after 30 minutes, Benoit goes down. But there's just time for more awful story revelations.
Do you remember, Jutah? Do you remember that day 7 long years ago when you were a young warrior seeing action on the battlefield for the first time?
How do you know that?
I know because I was there as well, Jutah, observing your every move. You see, I was your commanding officer. I'm the one who taught you how to fight. I'm the one who taught you how to survive. And I'm the one who taught you how to kill. I taught you everything! I taught you everything you know!
You!
I activated the self-destruct mechanism. Survive, Jutah. Your nightmare dies here.
So that nightmare Jutah has of destroying the civilian compound 7 years ago, the blame lies with Benoit. I have no idea how Jutah didn't know this beforehand, but hey, story's done, finally. The Dante exploded, Hornet is safe, the rest of the team escape, and Jutah is left to die in space. Except not really, because 3 years later we see that Commander Henri has left the army and Jutah visits her at her home, everyone's happy. The end. Final completion time, 2 hours, of which 45 minutes was spent in the second form of the Benoit chess fight. You now unlock Advanced Mode, which changes the main menu background graphics and lets you pick which level you want to replay, but what's the point in replaying anything beyond fun? Well, as you've been playing, you've likely found these data chips. They unlock new characters for the Versus mode, which in a nice touch can be played against another player or against the computer, and this mode might be one of the best parts of the game. In Versus mode, you don't need to play as Jutah. You can be the tanks, the hard shells, the blue mists, the laser sword samurai, or even the biomutants. You've got all the in-game attacks that whatever you chose had, and a recharging shield bound to R1. Hold it to block all incoming damage. And the Versus mode is great. The variety of the moves is fantastic. The only weakness is there's only one battlefield, a large open square with no scenery. So while it is fun to fight your friends, this means units with a powerful or quick ranged attack are at a huge advantage because you can always hit the opponent. The Versus mode shows a lot of promise. There's a huge potential to do a lot with this, and if Silent Bomber was ever remastered, fleshing out the Versus mode would add hours of replayability. So now we've replayed every level, finished every boss, and tried out Versus mode, we can finally answer the question, Silent Bomber, was it actually any good? It's a super fun, if very short, action arcade game with a unique twist on the Bomberman formula. The core gameplay loop of plant bombs on things is a solid foundation and seems to have been reasonably well fleshed out, with the 3 special bomb types and delayed explosions being being used as combat choices. However, it does feel that they haven't really mined for all the potential interaction this game could have. The use of scenery, planting multiple bombs on multiple targets and detonating them all at once, using enemies to transport bombs to hard-to-reach places, or combining special effects together could all be possible additional design areas. Plot-wise, it's weak, and would benefit from removing the interpersonal drama from the team and instead focusing on the fledgling nemesis made within the game, building him up to be something even more substantial. The Dante is a fine location, but it doesn't benefit in any way from the whole "it's going to destroy Hornet" plot point. Blowing up a megaship is enough justification for a military team. The characters are entirely forgettable except for Benoit, and that's only because his voice actor hams it up beautifully. And as for gameplay, it's exceptionally well paced right up until the final boss, which brings such a shocking difficulty spike, I'm amazed anyone managed to beat it as a kid. Ultimately, it's a very short, very fun arcade game with enough going for it to be enjoyable for 2 hours and enough potential to be disappointing it never got a sequel. So to end the review, I will award Silent Bomber.
You just signed your death warrant! You're dead! Count on it!
Out of 10. Cheers for watching. Another massive thank you to all the supporters on Patreon, Twitch and YouTube who keep the channel alive. You can support from only £1 a month. Check the video description for links to the Patreon, Twitch, Twitter and our Discord. And as always, remember...
Is this really the end? Roger that. I'm going back out.